Every summer has a story. Some are filled with laughter, road trips, and golden sunrises. But the summer of 2012, that one left scars, not just on my mind, but on my soul. It began when my family decided to spend 3 weeks at my grandfather's farmhouse deep in the Appalachian countryside. The place was built in the early 1900s and hadn't seen much renovation since. Creaking wood floors, peeling wallpaper, and dusty windows that filtered sunlight like stained glass, it had a strange charm, a kind of beauty that only old things have, the kind of beauty that hides secrets. There were 7 of us: my parents, my sister Kara, our 3 cousins, and me. Grandpa had invited us to experience a real summer, away from screens and distractions, and we were excited. No school, no internet, just fields, lakes, and open skies. But from the very first night, something felt off, the heat that didn't feel natural. That summer was one of the hottest on record. But this wasn't just normal heat, it was suffocating, still, unnatural. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on us. No breeze, not even at night. The crickets stopped chirping after sunset. Even the frogs were quiet. Nature itself seemed to be holding its breath. I remember waking up drenched in sweat. The fan at the foot of the bed spun uselessly. I got up to open the window, and that's when I saw it. A figure. Not moving, just standing. At the edge of the cornfield where the grass meets the forest. It was tall, dark, and still. I blinked, and it vanished. I told myself it was a tree, just a trick of the light. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't. The next day, my younger cousin Lily started acting strangely. She was usually shy and quiet, but that morning she was humming a strange melody, one I had never heard before, repetitive, hollow. It didn't sound like a child's song, more like a chant. When I asked her where she learned it, she just said, "He taught me." Who? The man with no eyes. We all laughed. Kids make up things all the time. But that night, I found Lily standing barefoot in the cornfield, staring straight ahead, whispering something in a language I didn't recognize. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. It took all of us to pull her back inside. She didn't remember any of it the next morning. The locked attic and the first drawing. By the end of the week, things were spiraling. Doors were opening and closing on their own. Lights flickered, shadows moved where there was no light source. The house groaned at night like it was shifting or breathing. Then Ben, my cousin, found a hidden panel behind the hallway bookshelf. Inside was a narrow, dust-choked staircase leading to the attic. It was locked tight, but taped to the door was a drawing, a child's drawing. It showed the farmhouse, surrounded by stick-figure people, all with X's over their eyes. Above them hovered a tall, thin figure, arms like smoke tendrils, and a face with no features. Just a mouth, a huge, open mouth. On the back of the paper was a single sentence in faded ink. "The summer brings the light brings the hunger." We burned the drawing, but the attic door never stopped rattling at night after that. A history of disappearances. I started digging through old newspaper clippings in town. I told the librarian I was doing a school project. What I found chilled me. Over the past century, every 11 to 14 years, someone had disappeared from that area during the peak of summer. Tourists, locals, kids, all near or around the same property, my grandfather's land. The disappearances always happened between July 15th and August 5th. We had arrived on July 12th. In one article from 1986, a woman reported that her daughter had vanished after claiming to see a man made of mist outside her window. The woman was institutionalized. Her daughter was never found. The presence grows stronger. By the second week, sleep became impossible. I would hear pacing above my room every night, dragging footsteps, deep breathing. Sometimes I would wake up with dirt on my feet, though I had no memory of leaving the house. One night, my sister Kara screamed. We rushed to her room. She said someone was whispering her name from under the bed. But when we checked, all we found were handprints, black, charred handprints on the wooden floorboards. Grandpa finally spoke up. His voice trembled as he said, "It feeds in the heat. It waits all year. But when the air is still and the ground is dry, it walks." We begged to leave, but the car wouldn't start. Phones had no signal. Even the clock radios reset themselves every day to 11:59 p.m. No matter what we did, we were stuck in a loop. The last night, a deal in the dark. The night of August 2nd was the worst. A thunderstorm rolled in, but no rain fell. Just lightning and wind that howled like screaming voices. The house was plunged into darkness. Candles flickered, doors slammed open and shut, mirrors cracked. Then we saw it. The thing. The shadow that had haunted us since day one. It didn't walk. It slithered across the walls, floor, and ceiling like smoke in reverse. Its face was a shifting mass, mouths opening where eyes should be, limbs forming and unforming like shadows in firelight. Grandpa stood in front of us and said, "Take me. Just let them go." The shadow paused. It tilted its head, and then it vanished. So did Grandpa, just like that. Aftermath. The curse never ends. We were found the next morning by a neighbor. All of us passed out in the living room. Paramedics said we were dehydrated, delirious from heat stroke. But we remember everything. The farmhouse was abandoned. No one ever bought it. But every few years, someone still goes missing near those woods. As for us, we still feel it. Every summer, without fail, around midnight, our clocks stop for exactly 1 minute. And in that minute, sometimes we hear breathing. Sometimes we hear humming. Sometimes we see a figure at the edge of our vision, watching. Because summer doesn't just bring the sun, it brings the shadows, and they're always hungry. Before the darkness unfolds further, subscribe, like, and share, so you're never alone when the next nightmare begins. And tell me in the comments, what haunts you the most? Growing up in a small town can feel like living in a snow globe. Everything still, familiar, and forever preserved in the same state. Summers were quiet, filled with dusty roads, faded porches, and the kind of silence that seemed almost staged. But just beyond that quiet charm, on the very edge of town where the gravel road turned into cracked dirt, stood a forgotten shed. It was made of rotting wood, its rusted metal roof caved inward, and its crooked doors sealed shut with a massive chain. Everyone simply called it the locked shed. My name is David, and when I was 16, I did the one thing everyone in our town knew better than to do. I went inside. I first became obsessed with the shed during the summer my uncle passed away. My parents sent me to stay with my grandfather, who lived just a few houses away from the edge of town. From his backyard, I could see the shed through a line of dying trees. Every time I looked toward it, I felt as though it looked back. The air around it seemed unnaturally still. No birds, no insects, nothing but quiet. One afternoon, while mowing my grandfather's lawn, I paused to wipe the sweat from my brow. That's when I noticed something odd. The chain on the shed door had been cut. Clean, no sign of rust or wear. It was just broken and hanging loosely. That chain had been on for decades. Everyone in town claimed that even back in their childhood, the door was sealed. When I asked my grandfather, his face darkened. He said it was locked for a reason. Shoot, and whatever was inside wasn't supposed to come out. I laughed it off, thinking he was just fueling small-town ghost stories. But he didn't laugh with me. That night, he nailed his windows shut. The next day, I walked to the edge of the property and stood in front of the shed. The door was slightly ajar. It creaked with the wind, but something about the motion felt deliberate, like it was inviting me in. I hesitated, heart pounding in my ears. The moment my hand touched the wooden door, the air grew cold. Not a breeze, just an unnatural, heavy coldness that clung to my skin like wet cloth. Inside, the shed was much larger than it looked from outside. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The second was the smell, a sour, decaying stench mixed with rust and mildew. My phone flashlight flickered as I stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath me, and the walls were covered in carvings, symbols, names, and handprints. Some handprints looked child-sized, others far too large. In the farthest corner stood an old wooden table. On it, several photographs lay scattered, all black and white. I picked one up. It showed a group of children standing in front of the same shed, smiling. One of them looked like my grandfather, but there was something else. Behind the children, barely visible, stood a figure in the shadows. Its face blurred, body thin and elongated. Just then I heard breathing, slow, raspy, and close. I turned around, heart thudding, but saw nothing. I backed toward the door, but the light from outside had vanished. The open crack was now just solid wall. I ran toward where the door had been, but all I touched was wood. Then came the scratching, from within the walls. It wasn't rats. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like something was clawing its way out. And then the whispers started. Low at first, unintelligible. Then words. He opened it again. I fell to the floor, gasping, my flashlight now dead. In the darkness, I felt the floor begin to vibrate. I could hear something moving, something heavy dragging itself across the wooden boards. Suddenly, a single eye appeared in front of me. Not human, wide, pale, and full of hunger. The thing lunged, but I scrambled backwards, slamming into what I thought was a wall. It gave way. I tumbled into a narrow tunnel, hidden behind a false panel. I crawled without thinking, the creature snarling behind me. Eventually, I reached the surface, gasping for breath in my grandfather's backyard. But the story didn't end there. The next morning, the shed was gone. Not destroyed, just gone. Like it had never existed. The grass where it once stood was fresh and green, and even the rusted chain had disappeared. When I tried to tell people what happened, they looked at me with pity. Some thought I was grieving my uncle. Others said it was heat stroke. My grandfather never spoke of the shed again, but he kept a shotgun beside his bed until the day he died. Now, years later, I've moved away. I built a life, had kids of my own, but just last week my daughter came home from school holding a drawing. It showed a small, rotting shed on the edge of a grassy field, and in the window, a pale face staring back. Every summer, the town of Maryvale transformed into a peaceful retreat for city folks. Children chased fireflies, couples held hands near Crescent Lake, and families gathered around bonfires. But despite the town's postcard beauty, there was always an unspoken rule among the locals. Never go near the quiet edge of Crescent Lake after sundown. Ryan, a 20-year-old college student from Chicago, had never heard of Maryvale's secrets. After his mother passed away from cancer, his aunt Lila invited him to spend the summer at her lakeside cabin. She said it would help him heal, help him process the grief. She didn't mention that her cabin sat just across the inlet from the quiet edge. On the first evening, Ryan noticed the lake was too still. It didn't have the usual movement of a living body of water. No ripples, no frogs croaking, no fish jumping. Just a silent, glassy surface that seemed to be listening. That night, while he sat on the porch journaling, he heard faint whispers from across the water. He paused, expecting to see people, but the shoreline was empty, only tall reeds swaying in windless air. The whispers came again the next night. Not loud, but close, personal, like someone breathing beside his ear and muttering, "Ryan, come back." By the third night, his sleep was shredded by nightmares. He dreamed of drowning in black water, tangled in roots, with pale hands pulling him downward. Sometimes in those dreams, he saw his mother standing waist deep in the lake, reaching out, her skin bloated, her eyes hollow. He'd jolt awake, heart racing, only to find the floor wet again. Small, muddy footprints trailed from his window to the edge of his bed. "I think someone's messing with me," Ryan told Aunt Lila. She just stirred her tea and muttered, "The lake has a long memory." That same day, he went to town and spoke with an elderly fisherman named Elias, who sat at the dock daily, never catching anything. When Ryan told him about the whispers, the man's face darkened. "You don't know the story, do you?" Elias asked. Ryan shook his head. There used to be a village at the bottom of that lake, old, forgotten. The dam flooded it decades ago. But before the water rose, something happened. Children went missing. Whole families vanished. They say the town tried to bury it. That built over the silence, but silence grows deep in water. Ryan laughed nervously, but Elias just stared. "It's not just a lake, it's a grave, and the dead, they're not done." That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. His aunt had gone to visit a friend in the next town, leaving him alone. Around 2:14 a.m., the house went cold. The silence outside felt unnatural, thick like fog. Suddenly, the porch light flickered, and he heard soft splashing, rhythmic like footsteps. He peeked through the curtain. Out on the lake, 3 figures were standing on the water, not floating, standing, motionless, pale, their heads tilted up as though sniffing the air. Then slowly they turned to face his window. Their eyes were jet black, and their mouths hung open unnaturally wide. Ryan stumbled back in terror. The front door creaked. He rushed to lock it. But when he reached the handle, the door pushed inward slowly, water trickling beneath it. From the hallway, he heard the creak of wet wood and a child's voice humming something eerie, tuneless, broken. He backed into the bedroom, slammed the door, and shoved a chair under the knob. The whispers returned, louder now, circling him from all directions. "You were ours. You were born here. You must return." He screamed. Then silence. The next morning, Aunt Lila returned to find the house dry. Nothing broken, nothing out of place, except Ryan's journal on the table, the last line scrawled frantically. "They live beneath, and now so do I." Police dragged the lake for days. They found nothing, not even a shoe. But some nights, especially in late July, locals swear they see 4 figures on the lake now, and sometimes they hear a new whisper added to the chorus, a young voice saying, "Come join us." Everyone talks about haunted houses, flickering lights, slamming doors, whispers in the dark. But they never tell you what it feels like when a house doesn't just haunt, it hungers. We moved into 107 Hawthorne Lane in early August. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet town, a new school for Jamie, a break for Mom after Dad's death. The realtor said the house had charm, and on the surface, it did. White paint, an overgrown yard with an old swing, and that porch, wide, welcoming, like something from an old photograph. But the house never welcomed us. The unease begins. The first night, Mom and Jamie fell asleep easily. I didn't. There was something about the silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was pressing, too thick, too deep, like the house was listening. The plumbing made noises that didn't match the rhythm of water. The floor creaked in the hall when no one walked. And then, there was the closet in the hallway. When we first moved in, the closet was empty, just shelves and dust. But on the 4th day, Jamie called me over. "There's a door in here," he said. I froze. There had never been a door, but there it was, wooden, narrow, arched at the top with no doorknob, just a rusted pull ring. The wood didn't match the rest of the house, and something about it made my skin crawl, like looking at something I wasn't supposed to see. Mom said the house had no basement. The realtor had confirmed it, but behind that door was a steep flight of stone steps, going down. The descent begins. I remember the way the air changed when we opened it. It wasn't musty, it was wet, damp, cold, and old. Not just old like years, ancient, the smell of rotted stone and forgotten time. We barely made it 5 steps down before our flashlights flickered out. Jamie claimed he heard someone whisper his name. I brushed it off, told him it was his imagination. I was wrong. Things get worse. Over the next week, the house got stranger. Clocks stopped at 3:07 every night. Jamie began sleepwalking, always to the closet. I'd wake up and find scratches under my pillow. Mirrors started fogging, even without heat. Then came the drawings. I found one on my desk. A stick-figure family standing around a basement door with a black mask coming up the stairs. At first, I thought Jamie drew it, but he swore he didn't. The next night, another drawing, this time just me standing in front of the open door, alone. The basement speaks. I began hearing things, breathing in the walls, knocks from below the floor. Once I pressed my ear to the wood of the hallway and heard scratching, slow, deliberate, from the inside. And then the voice came. It started soft like a wind. "Help me. It's dark down here." Sometimes it used Jamie's voice, sometimes Dad's, but one night it used mine. It whispered through the walls, imitating me perfectly, begging to be let out. The research unfolds. Terrified, I began searching local archives, school records, even old Reddit threads about Hawthorne Lane. The house wasn't listed on some maps. The basement was never mentioned in blueprints, not even the oldest versions. But I found one mention, an 1893 journal from a co-worker who claimed the land had a hollow in the ground that sings at night. No one believed him. Then in 1956, an entire family vanished from this address. Parents and a son. No signs of forced entry. The police report mentioned a strange door with no hinges. That report was later redacted. Most files were sealed. One thing remained, a warning scribbled in pencil on the corner of a photograph. It copies. It lies. It waits. Jamie disappears. The night of the thunderstorm, Jamie vanished. I heard the closet door slam like I rushed out of bed. The hallway lights flickered, then died. And in the dim gray light of a stormy night, I saw the basement door wide open. and the faint glow of a candle below. I descended the stairs. Each step felt like I was walking into something. The space was unnatural, too long, too quiet. And at the bottom, the basement was bigger than the house. There were walls made of stone, archways leading nowhere, and in the middle, a mirror. It stood taller than me, framed in something like bone. My reflection looked back and then smiled. The reflection moved. It was me, but not me. Its smile stretched too far. Its eyes were glassy, hollow, wrong. It stepped out of the mirror like smoke made flesh. And then it whispered, "I've been waiting. You opened the door. Now I don't need to hide." I backed away, but something grabbed my ankle. Jamie's voice screamed from the mirror, "It's not me! Don't trust it!" And just like that, the mirror shattered. The ending that wasn't an ending. I woke up on the hallway floor. The closet was closed. The door was gone. Jamie was in bed, staring at the ceiling. He didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, all he said was, "There's still someone down there." We moved, we ran, we never looked back. But the basement doesn't stay behind. That would have been the end. But it wasn't. Last month in our new apartment, Jamie found a small door in the back of his closet. It looked too familiar. When I opened it, there were stone stairs. Again, the final warning. You think you're safe. You think your home is your shelter. But once you open the basement door, once you hear the voice, once it knows you, it can follow you anywhere. The door isn't part of the house. It's part of you. And it's always hungry. Agala Hesak Yahoo. Every town has a place people avoid. In the town of Pinebrook, that place was Hollow Creek, a narrow, winding trail that disappeared into a dark grove of evergreens. Kids dared each other to step past the old rusted sign, but none ever stayed past dusk. Legend said lanterns would appear in the mist, and anyone who followed them never came back. Lena, a 19-year-old amateur photographer, had heard the stories. She was visiting her grandfather, who lived just outside Pinebrook. The small town was quiet, quaint, and dull. The perfect setting, she thought, to capture forgotten places on film for her blog. When she overheard locals whispering about Hollow Creek at the diner, she became intrigued. "What's with the lantern thing?" she asked the waitress, a middle-aged woman who immediately stopped wiping the counter. The woman leaned in and said, "We don't talk about that place, hon. Not anymore. Just don't go looking for those lights." That only made Lena more curious. The next evening, she packed her camera and flashlight and drove to the edge of the forest trail. The sun was setting, casting long shadows as she walked past the decaying sign that read, "Do not follow the lights." It was clearly vandalized, scratch marks across the wood, and what looked like dried, blackened stains beneath it. The deeper she walked, the quieter the world became. No crickets, no wind, just her footsteps crunching fallen leaves. A low mist started to roll across the path, thickening quickly. Then she saw it. A small lantern floating about 5 feet above the ground, its yellow flame flickering silently. It moved slowly between the trees as if waiting. Without thinking, Lena raised her camera and snapped a photo. When she checked the preview screen, the lantern wasn't there. She looked up, and now there were 3 of them. Curiosity overrode fear. She followed. As she walked deeper into the fog, the lanterns weaved between trees in a rhythm, always just out of reach. The forest grew darker. Her flashlight started to dim, then cut out completely. She banged it, but it wouldn't come back on. The lanterns were the only light now. Then a voice behind her whispered, "Turn back." She spun around. No one, but the fog seemed thicker, pressing in on her skin like damp cloth. She took another step forward, and suddenly the ground gave way. She fell into freezing water. Not a creek, but a flooded basin hidden by the mist. As she thrashed, she saw dim lights glowing beneath the surface, dozens of them, lanterns, then faces, pale, wide-eyed mouths open in silent screams. She clawed at the slippery bank and pulled herself out, coughing, soaked and shaking. But the forest had changed. The trees were now twisted, blackened, and wet like they had drowned. The path was gone. No direction made sense anymore. She ran, branches clawing her skin, the lanterns now following her, hovering behind, circling her in silence. She stumbled upon an old cabin, nearly invisible in the fog. With no other choice, she forced the warped door open and slammed it shut behind her. The inside was worse. Rotting furniture, mold-covered walls, and old newspaper clippings nailed to the wood. She lit a match and read one. Missing girl found at Hollow Creek, eyes burned out. Another. Boy last seen following lights, never recovered. Then a mirror on the wall began to fog up from the inside. A handprint appeared on the glass. Then another. Then dozens. Suddenly, the lanterns were inside the cabin too. The glass shattered and wind rushed in. She tried to run, but the floorboards turned to mud beneath her feet. From beneath the floor, hands shot up and grabbed her ankles. She screamed, kicking free, and sprinted into the trees. She didn't stop running until she collapsed near the edge of the forest. Morning light broke through the mist. Lena was found on the roadside by a trucker who nearly hit her. She was drenched, covered in scratches, and couldn't speak for hours. When she finally did, all she said was, "Don't follow the lights. They're not lanterns, they're eyes." Weeks later, Lena's photos were recovered from her water-damaged camera, all blank, except one. A picture of the old forest path with 4 lanterns floating mid-air, and in the background, a figure, faceless and tall, holding a lantern in its hand, watching her.